Mm. Good morning, everybody. Friends, I hope. Uh, just a talking head here, just another talking head in the internet. And yet, behind the facade, there's a thing going on here that I've realized is very important for me in this ongoing evolutionary process that I'm in. Uh, it's hard to put into words. And actually, the zone that I'm in right now is an interesting one. I've talked about some things that have happened. I've talked about spirit coming to me. And really, my entire adult life has been emerging into spiritual reality. That's been my entire adult life. That's been the intent that has been guiding me the whole time through every hardship and every trial and every mistake and every realization and every learning moment. The golden thread has been intent, and the intent has been realizing spiritual reality. Because spiritual reality, to say that it creates for me a kind of mysticism, spiritual reality, because it invokes so many ideas, right? All the religious systems we know, all the ideas that we may have and others may have in this blend of socialization that we dwell in usually, right? And yet, what am I talking about? When I talk about the spirit coming into my life, I'm talking about my manifestation of spirit, right? And that seems to be me talking about my uniqueness and my unusualness. But really, I'm no different from anyone else. Everyone has got exactly the same connection to spirit as everyone else does. We're all human beings. We're all alive. We're all living earth beings on some kind of loving, healing, evolving, dreaming journey. And those are my words, and therefore this is my spirit. But equally, we're at a time now where the old paradigm collapsed and all of the structures that used to hold us together just dissolving into chaos. That although it's frightening and dangerous and full of risk, at the same time, it is opportunity for the individual to rise. I'm telling you about my spiritual experience, how spirit came into my life. What's your spiritual experience? How does spirit come alive in your life? My spirit, your spirit, his spirit, her spirit. You know what I mean? Like it's like infinity is that way. Infinity is that paradox where I'm everything and nothing at the same time. It's very peculiar. It's very peculiar. So, what's been going on with me lately? Well, I've talked a lot about my legal problems and how problems are actually the touch of the spirit for me, because they're opportunities to integrate, to become more whole and more present and more intelligent and more active and more alive, because there's either the process of like, I don't know, enclosing, constricting, which is its extreme is self-destruction, or there's opening, blossoming, growing, developing, learning. Life is a learning thing. Life is a growing thing. That's not to say that like the way capitalism looks at eternal growth, or we're just going to go forever, and if there's any loss of profits is a problem, that is an unhealthy idea. It's an unhealthy idea. And yet, within the cycles of life that we live in this material zone, how do we tap into that deeper resonance, which is that place of learning where even though we are caught in cycles, we are still expanding through the cycles, in the cycles, encompassing the cycles, encountering more cycles within cycles, you might say. What's interesting to me is that I'm in a phase where I really want to connect. I want to connect I want to connect with you. I want this to eventually be a dialogue, because monologue has its limits, you know? As a musician, I can tell you that there's making music on my own, which is ecstatic and beautiful. There's music with someone, which is also ecstatic. And then there's music with three people or more. 3 people or more is a kind of special group energy dynamic. And I think that, if you pay attention, you'll notice it. You'll notice how these different modes create different possibilities. How I usually sum it up when I'm playing music is that when there's a few of us together, we put less in to get more out, in that creating that space in which the groove happens, sort of a trance, sort of a higher vibration that begins happening. That the more people who are in it, the less is required to like set the stage, if you will, or create and hold the space, but the more kind of rise out of it. It's exponential too. It's not like addition, it's exponential. 1, 2, 3 or more. It just, the possibilities are, what can I say, exponential. So I got a desire to connect, and yet I'm in this weird phase right now where I'm on my own most of the time. I'm off work right now, and I'm using all of my faculties of being a helper and being a therapeutic agent of change to just be present inside myself. And what I've realized actually since the new year began is that I'm in this phase where I haven't been on my own since 1998. That's weird. I used to always be alone when I was a little boy. It was an unhealthy aloneness, I think, because it was the result of like a friction and a frisson from the social world. The social world was a place only of shame, guilt, and ultimately punishment, violent. You will simply shut the fuck up and just do exactly what we say, And so the only time when I was free from that dimension was to be on my own, right? And yet the enculturation, the socialization is also this growing piece of like, the thoughts of others are that there's something really wrong with me. And so eventually, as I got into my 20s, I more and more involved myself in a social situation until, as they say, about 1998 and onwards, I have not been alone. Which is to say, relationships, children, animals, actually, in terms of like responsibility, being responsible for someone else, right? Friends, businesses, whatever it might be, you know what I mean? Like just responsible to be outside of myself, caught up in the world of 1,000 things. The world had me. And so here I am talking to you about my spiritual journey, about my healing journey, and ironically, I'm spending most of my time alone right now. And I'm not worrying about it, because that's the key. That's one thing I can tell you is the key to unlock the door to like feeling better about life is to just let life happen. That does not mean that there's no responsibility to take action and do things, but you've got to somehow become aware of the way things are. Whatever is going on, this too shall pass. Nothing is permanent. Everything is in flux. I had a relationship breakdown at the end of last year, and it had been coming a while, and it was for the best. But when it happened, it was still sudden, brutal, awful, all those things, right? And as a result, I lived in a hotel from December 13th to about January 15th. I spent Christmas in a hotel. and I can remember thinking of it as my hotel intermezzo, you know what I mean? And like being there to be present was very unusual, very unusual. And yet now it's just a memory. It's just a memory. And even though those days were very intense and spent, again, just like now, like 90% of my own, you know what I mean? I was still working at the time. Off work right now. I've been off work for a couple months. And it's interesting, because this aloneness, And the people in my life, it's like what I'm noticing Like with some friends of mine, who perhaps had the possibility of being more, but aren't, female friends, right? I just noticed the stuckness. You know what I mean? I got one friend, she has got a major depressive disorder. And we've known each other many, many years. We haven't seen each other in many, many years. She came into my life unexpectedly at a really unusual, synchronous kind of moment, kindled a bunch of old feelings. We explored them. And then what I discovered, actually, the liberation of what I discovered was that the connection between the two of us, for me, had been a connection in my own sense of being stuck, because I met her many years ago when I was still a broken record creature, stuck in my trauma-induced negative thinking and the pains there, just not myself, right? To meet her now, it was like to feel the shape, the emotional shape of being in that space with her, And I realized back then is everything that didn't work between us, I blamed on myself. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm the typical shame game that I was in was all my fault, and so the attachment for me was, of course, based on my own sense of inadequacy, right? So meeting her this time, in my total being, I could see the way our relationship evolved, which is to say, I don't know, she's a slave of newness. She gets something new, and for a moment, she escapes that negative thinking. And so she moves around a lot. She's very nomadic. She lives on her own most of the time. And she can stay long enough. The length of time she can stay in one place is the length of time it takes her negative thinking to catch up to what she's doing. And then the negative thinking, just like a stifling wet blanket, destroys everything. She even said to me at one point, "Don't let me sabotage this," she asked me. "Don't let me sabotage this." I was like, "I'll do my best." The thing is that stuckness is like, you can't force someone out of stuckness. You know what I mean? And so as our connection went on, that negative thinking encroached closer and closer until there was no connection anymore. She negated it. Nothing there of any value between us. This time, rather than going, "Oh, you're right, something wrong with me," I'm like, "This is it, baby. This is it." Like there is nothing wrong here, right? And then what I realized is that she's got this incredibly deep shame, guilt, and associated denial about her own sexuality. So she couldn't be ever present with me because anything to do with that part of herself had a severe negative reaction. And because I invoked severe and persistent mental illness in the form of major depressive disorder, I mean, she's able to understand that without medication, she couldn't even, she'd be in a hospital ward somewhere without medication, because the power of some kind of psychological imbalance, mood imbalance or thinking imbalance, whatever it might be, that stuckness that I'm talking about, trauma-induced stuckness. It was trauma-induced for her, and she had that similar symptom of nothing's ever happened to me, no relationship has ever hurt me. Oh, I'm so sorry that other people have been hurt, but I've never been hurt, which is just like, what are you talking about? Of course you've been hurt. Listen how you talk. Look at how you live. You've been really deeply hurt, and you got to heal those wounds. Nope, nothing. Okay, that was the end of our dialogue. What was liberating for me is to see that there was no weakness on my part. I'm empathetic to the way her negative thinking imprisons her, because I was in prison for decades of my life in the same way. Very strange. And in the end of it, it's just an impasse where it's like, okay, well, you go live the life of your negative thinking, because you have learned to cope with your severe and persistent mental illness. And unless there's something inside of you that makes you want to take the chance to learn and grow and be whole and live a fuller life, this is the end of your road, So there's one dimension of aloneness for me, because it's like I'm choosing to be alone rather than continue that engagement. And she doesn't want to engage with me either, because this is an impasse, right? Like, she's not interested in some kind of like intelligent, intimate growth. Not interested in that. and that's fine. I accept. On another part of my life, I had another friend, and we'd been getting close, and she'd been around me as my previous relationship had fallen apart for many, many reasons. What I would say is intergenerational trauma won the day there. And I'm not putting blame on anyone, just to say that intergenerational trauma, when you encounter it, is a powerful, powerful thing. And for myself, I do have insight about my intergenerational trauma. So I keep talking about this thing, right? But in my relationship, I discovered that my former partner didn't really have insight. She seemed to have insight, but really what she had a negative mental interpretation of how others saw her. And she didn't actually know herself or have any insight. All her insight were like pieces of how other people viewed her. And then her interpretation, which was always negative because of her own terrible, terrible abusive family background, that there ceases to be an interface to communicate, to be intimate, And there's no blame there. There's just a point where we just have to part ways. It's an impasse. We've got to part ways. At the end of my relationship with her was impasse, parting of ways, Anyhow, this other friend of mine is like the diametrical opposite of this woman I just talked about, with the major depressive disorder. I'll call her the recluse, okay? Major depressive disorder, the recluse, okay? Very much an introverted person, and whose blockage and compulsion to negative thinking is internal, mental illness, right? This other friend of mine, it's like she's a recovering addict, so very, very caught up in addictive process, and she's like the spark has come alive in her. She's no longer a victim. I mean, terrible history of abuse on many levels, and yet at the same time, a very high functioning performer in the corporate world of a previous life that she lived, and yet buoyed up by severe alcoholism and many process addictions, body dysmorphia, feeding disorders, like just a cluster of neurotic, negative compulsive habits, right? So she and I meet, we have a connection, we start getting together, and then she discovers things about me she doesn't like. She's experiencing her own process. I don't know, because she doesn't talk to me anymore. We talk almost every day, but she doesn't communicate anything to me. And if ever I seek some kind of connection, it's always like, I'm too busy. So what she has, she's the opposite. She's an extrovert. And so she doesn't see how her addictive process creates relationships where there's no her, She's in a relationship, such as it is, with a much older person, and yet she doesn't even have a room. It's a 2-bedroom place. They don't sleep in the same bed. She sleeps on a couch in the common area. She doesn't even have a place of her own. No room of her own. And she won't have a room of her own. This is how she chooses. And she says, this is my choice. I'm empowered to make this choice. Very true. But this is also the mantra of the addict, to be free to do what they want to do. You're not going to stop an addict doing what they want to do because I want to fucking do it. When you meet an addict, you just got to back off and go, okay, whatever you need, right? It's the complete opposite of the introverted person who succumbs to mental illness, which is this inner, bubbling pot of negativeness, right? On the other hand, it's like the coping mechanism of that, or whatever is going on inside, is this world of empty relationships that are just slavishly, addictively pursued, And how can I say this? How can I judge this person, right? Well, I don't know. I recognize addictive process in myself. I know what it feels like. I also know what it feels like to damage yourself. And she also is someone who has a lot of body pain and a lot of cripplement that's just swept under the rug. You know what I mean? I don't know what her nickname is, the busybody or something. I don't know. But my point is not to judge these people, but to bring it back into my own process, because in both instances, there's an impasse, but there's no connection. There's no connection. They don't want any connection, And I have to accept that. That's okay. You meet people where they are at, you know? So now, these are women, including my former partner, you know what I mean? Who just like, I don't want to strive with their stuckness anymore. You know what I mean? Like, in the work of mental health and addictions, I am definitely striving to help someone with their stuckness, right? And yet in each interaction in that milieu, you're just there trying to encourage someone's awakeness, willingness to come forward and just be present, you know? And that's the thing that you can't force. It's got to come out of someone, right? So I find that in the relationships with the females around me, no one wants to come out. No one wants to come out and play. And I got to accept that, you know? That's been my journey. That's been my journey of the last couple months. It's just going, okay, I'm on my own then. And equally, there's this realization that I haven't actually been on my own since 1998. That's 26 years. 26 years of like frenetic, you know, I'm create my creative energy, my intent. And the intent was always there, but I couldn't break out of that stuckness myself. So all those decades were just spent like just going through the same wheel of suffering. So now when I encounter people who are in their wheel of suffering, there comes a point where at the end of the day, if they don't want to renounce the wheel of suffering and try to feel better inside, I will back away. And I think that that's the only answer, is to just back away and be well on my own, be well on my own journey, be on my daily healing journey, to be here with you and pursue my evolving process with you, which is to live the dream that I'm loving, you know? So I'm in an interesting place, you know, I'm on my own, and yet I really have a feeling for being in community, you know, community of intimate partnership, community of energy friendship, you know, like this is my intent, is to be involved in that way, and it'll come. This too shall pass, just like my hotel life. This momentary, beautiful sabbatical that I've been given, I'm just reveling in it, you know, because what it's doing is allowing me to get into my intent, or to get into intent itself. Because what I find is interacting with people, it's like people don't know intent. People can't slow down enough to get out of their heads and out of yesterday or out of tomorrow. You know what I mean? It's like yesterday and tomorrow is this constant flux, and our thinking just holds us suspended between yesterday and tomorrow. You know, that's that surface tension I talk about, where you're like, you can't quite penetrate to get deep today. And today is all there is, you know? And it's deeper than just, you know, turning off your mind. Actually, mind, once you get control of your mind, mind is a willing and able companion on this journey, the journey of your aliveness, which, if you can just slow down enough and get to inside, is intentional living. Intentional living is not dwelling from the past, it's not dwelling from the memory, it's not dwelling toward the future, even though what we visualize now is the future. What you think today is the future of tomorrow. So if what you think today is only based on the memories of yesterday, then your tomorrow and your today are just going to be the same shit repeating itself, cycle after cycle. We can't help but be in the cycles, but how are we within all the wheels of life that are turning? That's the question. Intent, living with intent, is a kind of question, living in a questioning state, which is an open state. And I'm just free flowing here because music has shown me, the beads have shown me, that flow state is something which is musical, and that life has a very musical quality in terms of a kind of tone, you know? When I'm talking about music, I'm talking about cultivating a certain tone and resonance. and that it's actually the tone and resonance of everyday life as well, you know? It's hard to put words on. And what am I, like who's going to sit here and go through this with me, you know? I don't know. This is what I'm going through. I'm simply putting it on the internet because it provides me with the inner discipline. There's a camera on me. People are going to see this. Even if people watch for 2 seconds and then turn it off right away, that's okay. Because for me, this is a piece of my living moment as I'm sitting here alone in my place, you know? What am I doing? I am getting closer to intent. I'm letting it flow much clearer and purer in my life. And actually, it ties into something I've been thinking about the last couple of days. I mentioned James Joyce, very, very well-known literary figure from the early 20th century, James Joyce. He developed this idea of the epiphany, which was a state of arrest, a stopness, which happens in the middle of a well-written story where you realize something human and it stops you for a moment. That's stoppage. Carlos Castaneda, you know, as you learn from Don Juan, that's called stopping the world. Something happens. And it's in literature is an artistic way of achieving what happens to us in life, where sometimes we're moving along and then something just strikes us and we're stopped. And then what? Well, in that stoppage is flow state. And so as Joyce, because I'm talking about Joyce here mainly, as his career went on, he started to write books in this stream of consciousness, he called it. And Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake are books of flow state. However, I find these books just terrible to read. Like only an academic could read Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake. Because I feel I understand the intent, which is to say to be in flow state, right? So flow state is just being aware. And so in flow state, Joyce is there just having a mental diarrhea, you know, like Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake is just like mental diarrhea. Everything I think is my flow state, therefore everything is valuable. Beginning to end, it's just one long sentence practically. It's like, whoa, that's intense. Also, I don't know. I can barely read those books. I don't know who can. I would love for someone to come and tell me what they learned from those books and the value that they gained from them. Because for me, I feel the flow state in them. And then I look at all those words and think, oh my God, stop wanking off, man. This is flow state. Make something beautiful out of it. Don't just, masturbate your own mind. Come on. But hey, who am I to question the master? James Joyce, right? Because I do believe in the epiphany. I do believe in flow state. I do believe in stream of consciousness. However, at that point, what are we talking about anymore? Intent is what we should be talking about at that point. Intent. I was watching a guy describe the effects of cannabis, and he's describing it in a very medicinal. When I say medicinal, I mean like Western medicine, 20th century. This is what it does here. This is what it does here. Some people experience this. Some people experience that. What I will say is that using cannabis or like any substance, it's a question of the intent that you go into it with, just like anything in life. Just like that, when we talk about uncertainty, you know what I mean? Like it's like the thing you're observing is influenced to a great degree by your own vision of it. I mean, that is mind-blowing, but true. This is, one of those constellation of paradoxical, mind-blowing ideas that came out of hard science, like mathematics and physics. These concepts, like relativity, for example. Light as wave or particle, depending on whether you're looking at it or just experiencing it. It's, if you know its location, you don't know its speed. That's mind-blowing and yet interesting, because it's math, it's physics, It's how atoms work. It's how the universe works. And yet, I think it's a mistake to not allow that these are actually states of consciousness, and that whatever we perceive in the world around us isn't objective. It's our own consciousness evolving. And so it's no coincidence that, Einstein came along, science just broke apart the old paradigm. Relativity destroys any paradigm. Relativity is the new paradigm. And what does that mean? Dissolution into chaos. Relativity means the rise of the individual. And this is where we're at. We are at the social consequence of what science has revealed to be the world around us. But the world around us is nothing more than the projection of our inner world and the interaction thereof between our inner world and the outer world. And there is no real difference. It's just energy is energy. We're an energy field in an infinite complexity of energy fields. That's the way it is. And in one mode of perception, we come here into these bodies of light and matter, and we live out this particular dream with each other. But the real meaning is the fact that it's just such a very short journey, and at the end of it, our energy, it just merges with nothingness, which of course is God, is spirit, is the unmanifest, is the eternity into which infinity is expanding. Infinity we can know, and that's the basis of all art and all science. And here's something that's been on my mind lately too, as you look at our culture and you just know it's just garbage, because there's nothing beautiful. There's nothing beautiful. If you look at any of the ancient cultures, right, the things that they have left behind, the most beautiful pieces of their culture, are literally representations of the apex of everything they learned. It could be Stonehenge, it could be pyramids of the Maya, pyramids of the Egyptians, ziggurats of the Mesopotamians, or whatever, any kind of structure that has lived, what's left behind, those weird ruins of Göbekli Tepe, or whatever it's called, that Graham Hancock has opened us up to, where things are expanding our perception of the ancientness of cultures that can produce these monuments. But all of these monuments are the apex of technical skill and engineering, in terms of like blocks of stone that we could barely maneuver in our day and age now, with the kind of astronomical exactness to mark particular times of the year. So therefore, it's the apex of technology and engineering. It's the apex of astronomy, which is to say observing the world around us, you know what I mean? Which is also blended with the apex of their spirituality, which is to say they imbued everything with spiritual meaning. Any of those structures are mathematically, structurally, engineering-wise, astronomically, scientifically, and spiritually a complete unit. But where is that now? Where is that? It's nowhere. It's like the only big buildings are business buildings. The only temples are just churches of memory of the old paradigms. Nothing that's happening now for the future. Very few people that I've observed can actually visualize. I've said time and time again that any healing journey is the liberation of our capacity to visualize. What are we visualizing? What are we visualizing? Look at our culture. What is our culture visualizing? Our culture is visualizing endless domination of the capitalist overlords and endless, vaguely, I was going to say vaguely pleasant, but let's just say, like a slave populace who are inoculated with material comforts enough that they remain slaves to the capitalist overlords forever. That's the vision. That's the vision. It's never going to end in their eyes, right? Of course it's going to end. Everything ends, right? And of course, when you know everything's going to end, well, then what, right? The essence of what I'm talking about here is the essence of intent, you know? And I'm finding intent in being alone right now, but I guarantee you this is going to change. It's going to change soon. Eventually, my goal here is to be here as a talking head with someone else, and we're going to be in a dialogue talking about things. In addition, I also would hope someday someone is going to be interested in something of the same quality as I am and like have a dialogue with me, ask a question or make a comment or share some insight in order to provide new refractions. Because as I said, there's only so much that anyone can do on their own. In the end of the day, we are all alone. You got to really be able to cultivate and enjoy your solitude, yes. And yet to be in intimate partnership and then to be in intimate group energy dynamic, these are all dimensions that are important for the healthy flow of human life. And I'm in a phase right now where I'm on my own. So here I am, a single talking head, another single talking head on the internet. And again, the reason why it's important is because we got to use this evolutionary tool for what it is. It's an evolutionary tool. This communication tool allows us to be together in a oneness with anyone on the planet. It is unbelievable. And yet look at how it's being just debased and degenerated into the worst kind of shallow, vapid weakness driven by consumerism. It's like, well, welcome to our culture, right? And yet at any point, anyone can just unhook from that and hook into something different, you know? And so this is what I'm encouraging you to do, you know? Disconnect from all that shit. Connect into the intent inside, you know? And I'm on my own. I'm finding blockages in the people around me, and that's just bringing myself into my own personal self, lots of rest, and then interacting with you, you know? The main thing what I'm discovering these days actually is my body pain that I'm processing, because the body pain is just a history of tension. It's just a history of clench, wince, and recoil. If you can, you know, recall the way I've described how my trauma-induced conditioning has fucked my life up. Now that I've resolved that, I'm not listening to those schemas. I'm not, you know, I don't really give a fuck about what I'm thinking, to be honest. I'm sharing my thinking process with you right now, and yet this is one of these moments where my aliveness and my intent is what's leading me here. So my mind is just this beautiful passenger I got with me that is putting these words together in the key of the tone, of the intent, of the energy, of whatever being in the moment is, right? I find my days are very much an interaction between me and the pain that's in my body. And the pain that's in my body is always this reflexive, self-conscious desire not to be seen. Because, of course, getting seen when I was really little was always a recipe for negativeness. And yet, when I tap into my intent, I love being seen. I love to be in relationship. I love, actually, speaking of work in the field, I love the transparency of being in the field. It's the most relieving piece, is that to be in constant dialogue with all the colleagues that I share on different teams and different units and different wards, whatever might be happening. I just love the transparency of that, of the work, you know? And so in this work, even though, you know, I'm a bit rambling and God only knows what people think about this, you know, I'm just some old geezer, you know, a Gen X 20th century man talking about my outmoded views or whatever might be the negative responses coming back. At the same time, this is a process which connects me to my intent. And therefore, it's a value to me. And my intent is actually this awareness of the pain in my body. Am I working through it? I'm working through it with you because I feel really good when I'm here. And I hope you do too. I don't know if I've said anything really important today, but I needed to come back because, I was talking about, the manifestations of the Spirit, the knock of the Spirit, the descent of the Spirit, and the decision of the Spirit. In 3 weeks from now, the decision of the Spirit is going to come into my life. I don't know if I'm going to be ready to talk to you about it then, but that's when it's coming. Things are, there's a wave, or another wave is coming, there's ebbs and flows in life, rises and falls, inhalations and exhalations. You know what I mean? Like life is like that, ups and so therefore cyclic, right? So another cycle is coming, and then this beautiful solitude that I'm enjoying for the first time since 1998 is going to again become very social, very involved, and I think you'll see if anyone is indeed even out there that this is going to change a bit as well, because different phases, different things start happening, right? So right now, it's just a me and you thing, it's me sharing my intent of loving, healing, evolving, dreaming. And as I heal this pain, I can feel better and better about myself, despite what's happened. As I say, the moment you wake up, the past is history. History is to prelude to this moment. There is no causation. You know what I mean? That's just a way of thinking. That's conditioned response, trying to get control to protect you from repeating mistakes in the past, right? Again, bridging over the moment from the past through fear of the future. It's like, thanks, brain. Thank you, evolutionary process. I see where you fit now. You know what I mean? Because evolutionarily speaking, this consciousness is at its best when it is not rooted in history. I mean, what is evolution? What is growing into the future? Like if those single cells hundreds of millions of years ago had been rooted by their history, they would have never made bodies to explore the oceans. And we are the consciousness that's emerged out of these bodies. And now this new collective unit, just as cells are just a collective unit of other smaller protoplasmic things going all the way down to the atomic level, which is to say all of evolution used to be in the apex of the single-celled organisms from the Big Bang to that. All of energy was in a single cell. And then they fucking invented bodies. And now that's us. We are now the next evolutionary stage of bodies. And we're starting to come together. And that, so what I'm saying is now is the time when we should leave history behind. And in fact, that's what our transgender people are doing, is they're saying, oh, we're going to leave this gender binary behind. And that is shocking to us older people who are steeped in the old paradigm. And yet, as one of those people who my history process is very much binary, I'm a man, I seek women, etc., right? Yet my energy beingness finds a resonance in the transgender people, because it's true, energy is mutable, and when we die, we don't die as men or women, we die as energy beings. We surrender to the energy and the oneness, and whatever we were just dissolves into infinity. So every moment that we can leave our past behind and dissolve into infinity is the good moment. It's the right moment, because at those moments is when we come in contact with intent, with intelligence. It's a loving intelligence, and it has nothing to do with the history process. Ironically, the history process, it's like, we look at it as like, well, we are the sum of all of our memories, right? But lately, the resonance that's been sinking into me is the image of the ship sailing over the ocean, right? History is the wake that is going behind the ship. Where the real action is happening is where the prow of the ship is cutting through the waves, creating this explosion of friction, basically, right? That is the creative moment of living. And what is the past is just the wake. And the only question of the wake or the history is what shore those waves will eventually lap against, you know? I spend a lot of time at the ocean, and as ships go by, 10 or 15 minutes later, those waves come to the shore. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, there it is. You know what I mean? And yet that ship is not conditioned by its past. It is in the eternally refreshing moment of cutting through the waves going forward. Just another metaphor, but it's another way to think about being in the moment and being present as opposed to being stuck in historic process. Once you wake up, then you begin. And as you begin, take a second, tap in, feel the love, and then allow intent to move you. And of course, if you got your right intent, for me, I sum it up as loving, healing, evolving, dreaming, then anything you go into is going to resonate on that frequency. And that's what interests me again, if I think about the relationships with these women that I've known in the last little while, it's like my evolving, my dreaming, my healing, right? I'm going in there and I'm hitting the hard limits of their unwillingness to be present. And no one needs to be present with me. It sounds very blamey, but it gives me pause to go, well, okay, I'm going to withdraw from those places. Those people can come to me anytime they want to, right? But I seek people, I'm seeking the omni ones. I'm seeking the people who are ready to grow, ready to move, ready to learn, ready to move with intent, ready to intend, to create, to visualize. And that's got nothing to do with historical process, you know? It's all these things that I'm saying to you. This is actually what the pain says to me. Because as I work through the pain is the sensation of energy. It's the sensation of feelings that were crushed by conditioned response, by the brutalization of the external world that I then internalized into my own negative process. So as I feel my pain, I realize and release my power of visualization. I mean, in some ways, I'm powerful beyond my comprehension. But the only reason I realize that is because I'm loving. Lovingness is the power of creation. And that's what the pain said to me and keeps saying, because it's an everyday thing. It's an everyday thing. Once you begin living, you're living or you're dying, right? That doesn't mean you escape dying, but like living is to be in the creative energy process, right? It's to tap intent and be energy, right? And it doesn't make any sense unless we know that we're dying at the same time. Otherwise, it just becomes a creature of the mind. It just becomes an idea, you know? And yet, ideas are unavoidable. So if we have to have ideas, let's be careful of the ideas that we do have. This is why, again, going back to what I said a few weeks ago, it is to create the temple of dreams, because life is a temple of dreams. It's my intent. And therefore my intent is to be in this temple of dreams with you and share insight, to be alive and share aliveness, and to inspire and create and to visualize goodness, to make a temple of dreams out of my life, and to leave a temple of dreams behind, if for no other reason than that was the idea that I had as I briefly transited this beautiful world. And all of this is what the pain said. Anyway, I do hope you're well. Come and see me, please. Until next time, be well.